week to week. This program is an informative program that brings you news, interviews, updates in terms of what is happening in the government with respect to the public sector, of course, various topics. So therefore we have heads of departments and permanent secretaries, ministers of government and so on, who come here to give an account of what they are doing. So thank you very much for joining us. Today we are going to be having a topic. The topic will be juvenile delinquency prevention and treatment. And we're going to be looking at the New Horizons Rehabilitation Center, Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, and I have with me officials from the New Horizons who will engage you in a very lively discussion of what is going on at the center and how we are helping our young people to develop. I have with me in studio Ms. Adele Williams, who is the New Horizons Director. Welcome.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Davis.
I have Ms. Shanice Sam, who is the New Horizons caseworker. Welcome, Ms. Sam.
Thank you.
And I have Mr. Colbert Brown, who is the New Horizons house parent. Mr.
Thank
Brown,
you very
welcome.
much. Glad to have me.
Right. Of course, you know that our young people are extremely important. They have to be protected and they have to be helped in every way so that they can develop and be the best human beings that they can be. And sometimes they get off the right path, and it is our duty, our responsibility to bring them back in line so that they can contribute to society, so that they can develop holistically. And so we have the New Horizons Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, which is an institution that assists our young people in terms of their development. Ms. Williams, the New Horizons Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, why was it established?
The New Horizons Centre, we first came on board back in 2013. I think it was on the 9th of December. But it was a work in hand by the government for about 5 years prior to us coming along, where they were researching the needs of the young people and looking at creating a facility that can house young people between the age of 12 to 18 who were in conflict with the law. The reason why it came about was because there was no such facility around. When young people came into conflict with the law, previously there was the Harris's Boys Home that was there, that catered not only just for children that were probably that had difficulties and challenges with the police, but also that because there was a breakdown in the family. But there was no concise construction in terms of how young people, when they get in trouble with the police, to where they probably go through the jurisdiction system, the courts, and then what happens to them afterwards. So there was always a grey area for young people who fitted into that category. And there was times where young people were probably be placed at the prison or alternative accommodation was placed. And not only that, what happens to the young person when they do come into conflict with the law? What processes will be put in place to address the underlying issues that brought them to that place in the first, that brought them to being in that position, and having an opportunity to look at different types of treatments that would be available, programs, and kind of getting a wraparound service for the young person where we could involve other agencies that could play a part in looking at how we could get young people to address what their needs are, not just the young people, but their families, and also those that plays an intricate relationship with them as well. So this was something that our government was thinking about putting together, because there wasn't such a facility in the OECS. So New Horizons establishment was one of the first rehabilitation centres that was formed in the OECS, and has been kind of identified as the milestone, and where other countries look to us to look at how we actually programming and our policies and our procedures, and how we actually set up to meet the needs of the young people that we have in our care.
Right. In fact, Ms. Williams, I think that the OECS, they were doing a project on juvenile justice reform.
Correct.
And the New Horizons Center was heavily featured in it.
Absolutely. Because part of the research, as I mentioned before, that was done to gather the data and the information to put together the centre, looking at policies, looking at the procedures, looking at types of systems that would allow the facility to run effectively. We worked quite closely with the OECS in establishing policies, procedures, and structural guidelines. The University of the West Indies was also a part of the collaboration by them looking and researching other facilities like New Horizons in the US. I think they did some quite close work with Missouri, where our caseworkers had an opportunity in the early days to go and visit, look at the structures of how that was set up. So a lot of research, a lot of background went into it, which was directed by the University of the West Indies and supported through the OECS as well. So what they provided us prior to us starting was that they created a structural guidelines that laid out the operational manual processes of how we would function, that will deal with anything from once the young person comes into the centre, which Ms. Sam will go into further details about the processing, how looking at the different departments from security, looking at the treatment programs, looking at how we address health, looking at how we address education and all the other programs that we place together in order for us to address the needs and to provide some rehabilitation for the young people and their families, so when they do return back home, you know, they can have a different perspective and a different view in terms of how to manage themselves back in society.
Right. Now who was the center established for? Because there's some confusion. Not every young person under the age of 18 that gets into some sort of a problem with the law is admitted to the center. So who was it established for?
So the centre initially was set up for children that were in conflict with the law. As I said, because there was no structural means of how to deal with children, and it was always a bit of a grey area, because prior to the young people coming to us, they will go through the probation and child protection services as the first point of call, where assessments are done on the young person to identify what their needs are, and then an offer of treatment programs in terms of diversions or work with them while they're keeping them in the community. But when they come to a stage where the magistrate has to make a decision that is in the best interest of the community to remove the child from their homes and the community, New Horizons would have been there. So initially we were set up to focus on children that came into conflict with the law. Now we've expanded now, because we also have children who are in need of care and protection, because for one reason or the other there's been a breakdown with their families, and a decision again made by the magistrate to, over a period of time, anything from 3 months to 3 years, to remove that child from the home and place them on an order where we would provide a review in terms of looking at what their needs are and putting in a treatment plan of how we're actually going to address and work with the young person while they're within our care.
Now, what is your mission statement?
So our mission statement
Yeah.
is to accommodate children's order to be resigned at the centre in order to provide a safe and a secure caring environment to address the children's rehabilitative needs and to support the children to work to reintegrate the child back into their community to become a productive citizen in our federation.
Right, so that really encapsulates the purpose, really,
Correct.
of the facility. Now, how are children placed at the facility?
So, as I said, the child would come into conflict with the law as the first protocol point of contact. Or, as I said, there's a breakdown within the child at home with their families or whoever is the carer for the child at the time. Then the Probation and Child Protection Service would be informed. So if a child comes into conflict with the law and they're arrested and apprehended by the police, within 24 hours, the Probation and Child Protection Services will be notified by the police that they have this child in their care. Within 48 hours, one of the case workers from the Probation and Child Protection Services will visit the family and their homes to carry out an assessment. If the child's in custody, they will go to the custody and meet with the child and carry out an assessment so we can identify not just why they were arrested, but kind of have an idea of what their greater needs are for the child.
Now, who are some of the stakeholders that you would work with, collaborate with?
Yes. So, as I said, first and foremost, it would be the Probation and Child Protection Services that we share the same ministry and we work hand in hand. We work in collaboration with the police, the Ministry of Education, where provides full-time teachers and also skilled workers from the National Skills Department. We work in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. We have a local district doctor and district nurse as well within our area that we work very closely with because the child has to be assessed in terms of what their health needs are as well when they come to the facility. Other stakeholders would involve NEMA because of the crisis that we're in. We have to put in place a evacuation plan, or if there's some kind of natural disaster that's happened, we have partnerships that we work with in closely with them. Also, we would work in collaboration with the Department of... mine's gone, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
In collaboration with police, fire service, we have...
Social development?
Well, the Ministry of Social Development as well, of course. My apologies, everybody. The Department of Gender,
Yes.
the Department of Social Services as well for social assistance for the families that work alongside us. We also get engaged with, I mentioned education, but also sports as well and
Yes.
health for looking at what the children's needs are. The Department of Agriculture, we have a program that we run from ground farming, and also we have a hydroponic, so we have support from the Department of Agriculture to engage with the work that we do. Parks and beaches, we have involvement with, we're keeping the grounds safe. And other ministries that we would probably tap into to provide support in different programs that we may deliver with the children over the course of the time that they're with us.
I'm happy to hear that because what you have just outlined speaks really to holistic development. And of course, that is what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring about the holistic development of these young people who would have run afoul of the law. And so therefore, all is not lost, and the whole area of reform and rehabilitation are so important with these young persons. Now, when I was growing up, I often heard that an ounce of prevention, it was a saying that was very popular. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so therefore, I suppose when someone enters, when a young person enters, a juvenile enters, the rehab center, it simply means that that is a last resort. Isn't that so?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I mentioned before, the Probation and Child Protection Service are the agencies that would work with the children prior to them being with us. So, for a decision to be made by the magistrates to admit a young person to the New Horizons Centre is exactly that, what you've just mentioned, Mr. Williams, because there would have been an engagement by the Child Protection Services as the first protocol, where they do more of the early intervention, diversion programs, because the whole aim is to keep the young people. The whole aim isn't to remove children from home. The whole aim is to look at ways how we can actually, the Probation and Child Protection Services can provide assistance and support to families to prevent young people being withdrawn from their home. So that's the last thing that anybody would want a child to be taken from the home, because it could be a devastating, not just for the young person, but for the families, because every person has a role to play in the families. Some of our young people have responsibilities within their families, so once they are removed, then it kind of upsets the apple cart in terms of who is going to be there to take on those levels of responsibilities. And also it's a traumatic experience for any child to come into a place where they have no knowledge or understanding in terms of what that is. So at the first protocol, it would be a terrifying experience for the child initially to be removed. So we look at ourselves, and our staff look at ourselves as the prime carer for the child once they've been removed. And within the staff team, and not just the ones that work directly with the staff, but we have domestic staff, we have cooks, we have security, we have gate guards, we have drivers. Everybody plays a part in that child's life once they come to the centre. Everybody has a role. My motto to the staff, as always, is that we've got to model the behaviour that we would want to see in the child, because at the end of the day, they're looking at us as replacement parents to be giving them guidance and support in looking at ways to modify their behaviour and issues of why they've come to the centre.
Right, and that last sentence that you made, I would ask Ms. Sam, because of course you, in order to develop any sort of a treatment program, you probably have to look at the whole thing of the factors that would have influenced the juvenile delinquency in the first place, and you have to look at those risk factors, why the child, the juvenile, or the adolescent started engaging in juvenile delinquent behavior. So, Ms. Sam, what are some of those factors you think that may increase the risk of juvenile delinquency?
Well, usually what we have come across is that children who are in, let's say, quote-unquote, bad areas, you know, the areas that would have been marked as poverty-stricken, you know, those are normally the children who we see come through our gates, the ones who are coming from broken homes. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean single-parent homes, but, you know, a breakdown in the structure in the home. Those are the children that we will see. We will see the ones who are not as academically inclined, you know, but they don't have, the classrooms are so big in the public school that they don't have the attention that they need to develop their skills. So they become the class clown, or they act out and just to gain some attention like that. So those are some of the main factors that we see during our assessment period for the children who come to us.
Last week I had on my program Mr. Gerald Connor,
Yes.
who is the acting director in the Department of Probation and Child Protection Services. And one of the things that came out of the discussion is that sometimes there is a history of family violence and abuse in the home that really affects the child. And sometimes when you see the child acting out in very aggressive ways and things like that, sometimes you have to look to the family and to see what is the breakdown there that you would have said. Now, what happens when a child enters the facility? What's the process? What happens?
Okay. So on initial entry to the facility, we try to encourage our parents to come with us because we like to get some kind of background information. The child can only give us so much, right? So the family can tell us when a behavior would have started, you know, what was happening around that time. So we can then identify where we need to focus our counseling, if counseling is a part of our program. So we need to figure out exactly what areas we need to focus on when we are focusing on, when we're creating that part of it. So we do that initial process where we sit and we talk to the child to get their perspective, to make sure that they understand why they are with us, to make sure that they understand what the facility is. We explain the rules of the facility, what is going to happen while they're there, not only to the child but to the parents, so that everybody is clear. We explain the responsibility of the parents because we don't want it to be a situation where the child is at the facility and the parent think, okay, my job is done until whenever they come out. We try to very much to encourage family involvement throughout the entire process. So we gather as much information from them in that sitting as possible. And then we go through a process of assessments. So we will start with a psychological assessment to see if there's anything that we need to kind of put a little bit more of attention to. We do an educational assessment. We do a medical assessment. We do a dental, physical, everything really and truly, so that we can create a holistic plan for the child. We also go through the process of creating a behavioral contract with the child. So the child will then identify to us what they think some of the behaviors are for them that they need to work on. So let's say, for example, they say swearing is one of their things. They will say, okay, so one of my areas is swearing. This is what I can do. Instead of swearing, this is what I can do. These are the people who can help me with it while I'm here. They even go so far as to create a punishment. If I'm doing it too much, what can my punishment be?
Yes.
And,
so there's a reward system.
Exactly. And they're taking control and accountability for how their behavior is managed and how much they're willing to buy in to what exactly it is we're trying to do for them.
Yes.
So in that process, and then that information is shared with the house parents and the security, so now they know what behaviors to look out for. They know what rewards need to be given, what punishments need to be given in that instance, so that we're able to really focus on these things that the child will identify. And then we will review this over periodically, because, you know, sometimes we don't really acknowledge the little steps that the children are making. We're so focused on the whole behavior that we don't give them credit for the little things that they're doing. So if they come in and they swear, let's say in a sentence, every other word is a bad word. And then 2 weeks down the line, it's maybe once every sentence. You know, this is something that we want to acknowledge, you know, give them credit for and show them that we see that you're making progress. We encourage it. Good job. Keep doing it. You know, so in that initial thing, this is what we tell them. And something else that we also tell them is that it doesn't matter why you're here. It doesn't matter the reason that you came through the gate. You're through the gate now. You're a child. You'll be treated as a child. You'll be treated with respect. You'll be treated with love and attention. That's it. Nothing else matters. So within the time that you're here, we're going to do our very, very best to make sure that you are treated as fairly as possible and given the environment that you need to make all the changes necessary to be a better citizen.
You know, Ms. Sam, you mentioned something that jumped out at me, and it is basically, how do you foster an environment of positivity? Because sometimes what contributes to the problem of the child is that they're in environments of negativity.
Correct.
And they are never really rewarded for when they do good things, when they perform good behaviors. They're always put down. Nobody ever says, good work, let me give you a pat on the back, or anything like that. And last week in my discussion with Mr. Connor, that really came up as well, because a gentleman called in, and the gentleman was basically saying, look, one of the problems that we have is that parents, sometimes in the Caribbean, I'm making a general statement, not everyone, but they don't tell their children they love them. They don't hug them. They don't kiss them, and that sort of a thing. And they take it for granted that the child will just believe that, you know. They will do things, of course. They may buy them clothes and shoes and all, which is really their responsibility as a parent. But that affective side, you know, is so important to helping a child with their self-esteem, helping them to feel worthy and so on. Because sometimes I think that when children are acting out, it's because they have never really been validated by those people who care. And who more should care than your parents?
Correct.
You know? And that brings me to Mr. Brown. Because, I mean, the children are taken from their homes where they have parents and so on, and then they're placed into the center, and then they have these house parents. Mr. Brown, what is the role of a house parent?
Well, the role of a house parent is to look after the child's well-being on a day-to-day basis. Just like any other home with a parent, you make sure that the child is well looked after. Make sure you're doing the chores.
Yes.
Teach him tidiness. Teach him all the essential things that he will have to go back out to society or to his community. And then try and make some different changes within his life, especially from his mental aspect. So we have like 5 house parents over there that should be on each, one should be on each shift. And that's we will basically to make sure that the kid is doing the right thing.
Right. Now, what have you discovered? Because sometimes if the children are coming out of homes where you know, their biological parents and so on, and, you know, they have, in terms of the relationship between the child and the biological parent, that would have broken down. And so therefore the child comes to the home and the child has certain expectations in terms of how to relate to somebody now who is an authority figure. What are some of the problems that you have encountered?
Well, we normally have meetings with the resident, like maybe a one-to-one, we bring them out
Certainly.
as a group and have a little meeting with them, have discussion with them, and ask to let them know, well, this is how you deal with people, you respect your elders, and this is how you should go about talking to your elders, talking to authority. You don't go and talk to authority as if you is this type of person and show that kind of image. You always show respect, and the person will show you respect, and that's how you deal with it.
Right. So Ms. Williams, there has to be, because they were socialized in a particular way, and so therefore the challenge is, how do you re-socialize them?
So when a child comes to the the centre, an assessment is carried out. We had a full-time counsellor that will carry out a number of different tests, from personality tests to psychological well-being, to relationships. So a number of different tests is conducted, so we can kind of grasp a full aspect of where that child is at. But it's done over a process. So don't imagine that the child is come and then we just do an assessment and then we make an analysis. It's done over a period of time where we can monitor the child and see where the issues stand. So once the assessments are done, and prior to that, as I said, there would have been, most of the time, there would have been work that would have been done with the child with probation and child protection services prior to for them to come in. So we have a background knowledge on what the key issues are for the child. So assessments are carried out, psychological assessments, health, well-being, character, personalities, etc. And not only just from the counselling, but also assessments through the families as well. So we can get a holistic view in terms of what's happening with that child. From there, we would have a case conference. And a case conference is an opportunity for different agencies that work or that's involved with the child or can potentially work with the child will come around together to discuss what they know of the child. So, for example, you would have the caseworker from Probation and Child Protection Services who would have engaged with the child.
Yes.
You probably might have the school counsellor who would invite their families, parents, or other important people that's played an aspect of that child's life. The caseworker would be involved, and sometimes we'll invite somebody from health and probably a prominent person from education as well. And if there's any other organisations that probably has worked with that child, we would invite them along. So from there, we can now grasp an aspect of who that child is, what their key issues and their needs are, and we can devise a treatment plan that will be able to speak of what the needs are and how the centre and the other agencies that are involved with the child will be able to come together and put an input in looking at behaviour
Right.
and
So
modification.
certainly. So each child is assigned a probation officer or a case manager?
Correct. So that would be Miss Sam. Yes.
Right. So the role of the probation officer or the case manager is to ensure that the child's behavior is not out of control or that the child is making some sort of a progress.
Right. So the role of the case manager, aside from just managing the behavior of the child, is to ensure that the child is being treated fairly by all parties involved and that everything is being done in their best interest. So we work closely with the probation department because in most cases they would have been the first persons, having contact with the child, and they would have a history with the child, history with the family. Once we get involved, we focus more on the child, and we ask that the probation focuses on the family, so that work is not being done in one place, and then the child is going back to the exact same situation they would have left when they came to us. So, like Ms. Williams said, we create a treatment plan, and that treatment plan is being revised every 3 months. So it says who is responsible for doing what within this 3-month period. We check to make sure it's done. We at New Horizon, we're very much on the ball, just a little toot-toot.
What we like to ask with the behavioral thing is that the case managers and we as house parents will be the first person to deal with the behavior pattern, and then we work close with the case manager and then let them know, well, this is the improvement, this person is not improving, this is whatever the weakness and strength is, then we report it to the case managers.
Right, because as house parent, you would be in a position
At all
basically
time.
to always to see how that
Correct.
child
The
is really
changes.
behaving, the
Correct.
behavior of that child.
And if you remember, I mentioned the behavioral contract. This is where
Yes.
it comes into play. So the house parents are aware of what we're working on. So they are able to address it when we're not there.
Yes, so
Yeah.
so therefore you would praise the child when the child does something positive, and then of course, when they don't do something positive, when they do something negative, it's not that you will put them down, but you will say, well, this is how you can do it better,
And a lot of the time, the child knows themselves. A lot of the time when human nature, there's not an expectation that the child is going to be performing and behaving all the time because, as I said, they're removed from their families. Whatever issues and challenges that they are dealing with, we're getting the response through the behaviour. So the behaviour doesn't come from nowhere. There's always a deep-rooted issue why the behaviour is there. So once there's an outburst that the child probably might be acting out, once the child has time to sit down and to calm themselves, and the next point of stage would be for the house parents on hand now to address the issue, the child has the answer. They can say, well, it was because of this, or it was because of that. And that's the process, because even as adults, there's times where we get off key, there's things that are troubling us, and sometimes we might react and behave in a certain way. It's just human nature. And sometimes we don't even know where that's come from. So if we can now instill within the child now to look at how it's showing up, because it might show up as an agitation, it might show up as an outburst, it might show up as that they're irritable, and then because it starts with the emotion. It starts with a thought, it starts with an emotion, and then their behavior. So part of the work that we're doing with the child is for them to acknowledge how it starts, because they can start to think, well, yes, because I was thinking about this. And then it starts with the thinking, and then it starts with an emotion. So I always refer to it like a drain when I'm talking to the children, that it's about catching yourself before it gets spirally out of control. And that's part of the initial work that I'm not even going to put it down to the caseworkers or the house parents, or the staff, because all the staff plays an intricate role. Doesn't matter, as I said, what department within the centre that they're working with, all of us plays a role to acknowledge that. And it's a lot about observing as well, because you have to observe. I don't have as much contact with the children as what the rest of the workers do, but you know, I come in the morning, I can see in their eyes. You come in and you see. You can spot it straight away that you look in their eyes, or they haven't got a smile, or something's on. So it's kind of like picking up those signals as workers of spotting it, especially with the house parents, of seeing them first thing in the morning and doing a lot of observations in terms of what's happening for that child at the time.
You know, you mentioned something very important, Ms. Williams, is that we have the resources within us to be able to really come to solve our problems.
Yeah.
And it is not about, I'm sure you would agree with me, Mr. Brown, it's not about solving the problems for the children, but it's how you can get them to solve their own problems. And that is about problem-solving skills, which I think is a part of your program, Ms. Sam.
Yes, yes it is. So when we, the caseworkers, will sit down with the children, these are things that we will tackle. You're right, we would have gotten the reports from the house parents as to what the issues might be, if there is an issue. And we will discuss with the child, you know, why? You know, why do you think this is happening? Why do you think this is the behavior that you're displaying? How can we do it better? Right? Because we always tell the children, they're not their behavior. Sometimes we see the behavior and we brand that child as the worst child in the world when the child was just going through something, and that's the only way they know how to express it. So we tried hard, very, very hard, to work with them in how to express yourself so that people understand what it is that you are feeling, so that we can know how we can help you. And you can get the help that you need. That is, in its sense, solving your problem. How do we solve your problem? Because if you cannot express it to us, there is nothing we can do about it. So we work very hard in getting them to understand.
Yeah, so it's about, Ms. Sam, in terms of building character.
Correct.
And in building character, the focus is not so much on the behavior, but who am I becoming?
Correct.
Who am I becoming by a particular behavior, an action? Right? It's almost like it's an area of virtue ethics.
Yep.
The focus is on who am I becoming, my character. What character am I developing? You know? Which is so important, and that must be the focus, because at the end of the day, you will be judged on your character.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the centre is, I mean, it's a rehabilitation, but it's also a therapeutic, because, you know, where we're situated, it's away from community, away from the hustles and bustles of life. So a lot of the young people would say this is the first time that they've actually had time to sit down, think, and review, because there's a lot of time to do that. So once they've removed from their communities, from their homes, and have an opportunity to spend time in self-reflection, because they have a lot of time of self-reflection, and a lot of the work that the counsellor would have done with them is looking at strategies of how you manage character building, how you manage dealing with conflict within yourself, looking at little tactics that they could use, whether it's
Conflict resolution.
holding their breath, whether it's counting to 10, and sometimes you're talking with the child and you can actually see them counting to 10, and I would say, well, what are you doing there? She goes, well, it's a tactic that Miss Jacobs told us, this is how, and you praise them because they're actually putting it into focus, putting it into use. And we hope, I always say that part of our work is planting seeds, laying down some foundations, skills that they could use, not just now, but in their future, because, I mean, they're going to become parents themselves. And nobody teaches a parent how to be a parent. You know, we learn on the go, or we learn through our experience.
Except nowadays, I hear them talking about parenting classes
Yes.
and all that sort
That's
of
something
thing.
we
I
do.
mean, our parents never knew nothing about that.
Exactly.
They just learn on the job.
Correct. Or what you've been taught. Because a lot of time, what you would tend to do is to look at some of the good parenting that you probably received yourself, and you know, you keep hold of that, and then you would make decisions to introduce new things. And probably these are new things that you probably wasn't taught from your own parents, but you saw examples of it probably through a church family or a family down the road. So our planting of seeds that we do is planting little ways of how we could do behaviour modification and show them different tactics to use through the seed planting. So hopefully that thing is carried through with them as they grow into their adult lives. But parenting classes is something that
It's new.
we run those in collaboration with probation and child protection
That's
services as well.
important.
And it's not a knock on parents. So this is never a knock on parents that whose child has been sent to the centre in knocking their parenting. It goes for everybody. It should probably be a universal part of prenatal care, where parents that are becoming pregnant, it should be probably something that's introduced, because that bonding, which doesn't come natural for everybody, all right? So parents, there's always this thing that mothers should naturally bond and have this natural caring. Some mothers don't find it. Some mothers don't find it. However, it can be compensated through other areas that they could learn a skill in how to nurture and look after.
Mr. Brown, I am sure that sometimes you would find that the children are angry. But
Yeah.
they're not really angry at you. It's not because they're angry, but to think that it's you that they're angry at. Sometimes it's not you, it's they're angry at their own situation, they're angry at something else, and that might really come out towards you.
Yes, but how me personally I handle things is first you gotta understand whoever the child is, right? The way that child does react all the time. So if I go to work tomorrow morning and a child that normally be quiet and calm and don't be saying nothing, and then I go this morning and he blow out, I allow him to blow out. I allow him to vent, and then come back to him maybe the next hours, and then
Yes.
try have a conversation with him and find out what's the reason. Now, if this reason is a problem which I can't handle, then I push him to his case manager, whoever the case is. But most of the time, I could solve them problems.
And that is wisdom. Because usually when someone is angry and they're venting and so on, it's very difficult to speak to them in that moment.
You'll never get nothing out
You
of
will
it.
never get anywhere. You wait until that person then is calm, and then you go to them and you try speaking with them, and you get a better response. And that is something, Mr. Brown, that even as adults, sometimes we have not learned that.
True that.
The thing is, when people are angry and they come to us, what do? We get angry too. And then that is where the conflict comes in.
Escalates.
You see, guys,
Escalates.
the center have children from different backgrounds. So you're dealing with two different couple different personalities. So you as an individual, we as house parents are workers at New Horizon. The first thing we need to do is study the child and study who the child is and what behavior the child. Then you will know how to deal with whosoever the individual is.
Yeah.
So basically that's what we do.
Yeah.
So that each child is unique.
Very much so.
And therefore you learn each child as a house parent.
Yeah.
So in a certain sense that you can even predict certain behaviors
Before it actually happens.
before it actually happens of a particular child, because you would know how each child reacts
Yes.
Correct.
and reacts to different
Yes,
things.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Which is very good, because that takes on your part, Mr. Brown, and all the house parents, the observation.
Yeah.
The observation and the monitoring and all of that, in which you really come to learn
Yeah.
that child, which is very important. Now, how does the center function on a daily basis, Mr. Brown? The tentative schedule, what sort of a schedule that the children would have? Everything requires a sort of, because they have to learn as well,
Well,
organization. They have to learn responsibilities, house chores, when it's time for prayer or when it's time for school work. And that is so important to leading an organized life. And
Yeah.
do you know that many adults do not have a structured life?
well, you see, over there, the staff that work between the night, let me start from the night session, that work from 11 to 7. We wake them up at 4:45 for them to start preparing for the shower, make the beds, clean the units, and when they're done, make the bed and clean the units, then they have the shower. Some staff would allow them out and have discussion with them at morning, and then they go back to the unit. Then the person that coming out from 7 to 3, then they start to deal with that, the residents. Now, the 7 to 3 shift would, like now school is on vacation, some of them would carry them to do gardening, cleaning maybe around the facility. Some of them will carry them upstairs and for them to do computer lessons. Then we might have somebody coming in, well, presently nobody coming in now because of the COVID, but normally we will have somebody coming in, maybe do yoga classes, maybe sewing classes or whatever the case might be. There's skill set things for them to do. So they will go up to maybe 12 o'clock doing whatever the skill set might be for them. Maybe three person coming in or 2 person coming in that morning. And then in the afternoon now, the shift in the afternoon I will allow them to maybe play some more games, shower, or come out, watch some TV, have discussion with them. And basically that's the daily session.
Yes. Now, Mr. Brown, a few years ago,
Huh?
During COVID.
During COVID, yeah.
a few years ago when I was studying in Trinidad, and studying ministry, studying theology, and would have to go out as part of our pastoral duties on the streets of Port of Spain and to work with homeless street kids. And part of the objective was to interact with them and so on, but then to try to get them to come to a place that we call Marion House, which was a house for homeless street children. And what you find happened is that even though you got some of them into the facility, some would run away. Why? They preferred the streets. Because on the streets, they don't have that structured life. They don't have people to tell them, look, you have to follow this program, and so on. They do whatever they want, when they want, and how they want. And that must be something to take a child from a situation where there was really no structure and then put them into a situation now where they have to adapt, the adaptation to a structured life even though that teaches them discipline and so on, it's not an easy thing.
Well, the consistency in the tentative schedule brings security and safety and calm, because when the child can predict what's going to happen from when they wake up and there's a routine and structure that's in place, it brings a sense of security for that child. Every now and then it probably might not work like that, which is okay because that's life. But the consistency and the structure that's in place that we provide from the child, because what Mr. Brown described earlier is what's happening now in COVID. But as I mentioned before, the partnership work that we do with education, we have 3 full-time teachers. Our head teacher is Miss Mary Clark, and we have a Mr. Clyde Williams and Miss Deslyn Richards. They are superb, fantastic teachers that go above and beyond their point of call. We've had 3 years of 100% examination rates. We've got 2 of our young children that are this year that has been put forward to do exams. So we're praying that we make this into the 4th year where we have 100% record in our education. But we have a good support system as well from our national skills. Miss June James really supports us a lot. We have Miss Mavis Armstrong that comes and does skills work. And we have Miss Sharon Barbosa that comes and does culinary arts. Mr. Hendrickson, he does electricity. And we have Mr. Agard as well, Mervyn Agard, that comes and teaches IT. We also have Mr. Pension, who used to be director for the culture department.
Yes.
That teaches, come and teach culture.
Creighton Pension.
Correct. He comes and does culture and heritage, which is hugely important for our children to know about the history and also about not just within St. Kitts but within the region, key points of what's happening. And he does a lot of folk songs as well, which he plays on a Friday afternoon, and we all run upstairs and join in with the songs that he sings, which is absolutely fantastic. We also have a different range of programs that we delivered, as Mr. Brown says.
Yes.
We do yoga and sound bath.
Those are therapeutic interventions.
We also have Mission St. Kitts that comes and does a program on recovery. We have Miss Collins, that she's from one of the family counsellors that comes and does a program on legacy, specifically with the girls.
Jacob with the art program.
And also Mr. Thomas is going to be joining us once the COVID is ended to do some specific work with our young men. We have also Miss Douglas that comes and does a lot of ground farming. So we can do our fork to farm programming, and the children absolutely love the ground farming. Who else? Have I missed out? Anybody else?
Not that I can think about it.
And then we have our counsellor that runs some anger management resolutions program. So we have a program that every quarter we will change up the programs that we are delivering. But that's what we deliver.
Also collaborate with the National Drug Council that comes in and run a drug program.
The National Drug Council,
Yes.
because some of the children are coming from environments, especially today, of substance abuse. And when I talk here about substance abuse, mostly it is a lot of our young people are involved in the smoking of marijuana. And of course, you know, they get involved early with that. And you know that the science is saying that when they start so early with marijuana use, it affects their brain development.
Correct.
It affects their schooling, and it affects all of that.
Correct.
You know, so coming out of an environment where some of them had already started smoking and involved in drugs and so on, and then placing them into an environment now where they can't do that, that may bring about some aggression as well. Withdrawal and all of that sort of a thing. I suppose that is where the National Drug Council comes in.
But usually, if we have a child that is actively using, during that assessment period, which normally runs for about 3 weeks, that will be the withdrawal time. So they will go through all the behaviors, and the staff, of course, will be informed. You know, this person is going through, so just expect these kind of behaviors to come from them. So they're aware, and they're not taking anything personally. Right. After that period, we then engage them in counseling. You know, make them aware of the effects of drugs on your body. You know, we understand that you're using, and this is what it has really come to. We understand that you're using. We understand that once you leave here, you have no intention of stop using. But we just want you to just cut back, you know, to bring it down a little bit. If you're accustomed to doing 20, let's try go for 10. You know, don't do it before you go to school. Don't do it before you go to work. So just really teaching some skills as to how to not let it affect the life that you're trying to lead. And like I said, that's really is where we're at now with the conversation happening around decriminalization and legalization and all of that.
Yeah, but the decriminalization and the legalization and all of that has nothing to do with children, because children are not supposed to be involved in the smoking of marijuana and the using of alcohol and that sort of a thing. The decriminalization argument and the legalization argument is for adults, not children.
Correct. But these adults are influencing these children. And so these children now are thinking, of course it has to do with me, because they say, you know, we can use it, so we're going to use it. And we really have to tell them, one, you're underage, it's illegal. And two, if you are going to use, it cannot be that you're sitting down all day just smoking. You have to know how to balance, because that is so important. You cannot be doing this and then you can't function when you go to school, you can't function if you're going to work or anything like that. So the conversation really has become, how do we balance and how do we not overdo? Like, let's don't overdo it.
Because gone are the days where just say no. Back in the 80s, the slogan was just say no.
Just say no. That is really not enough. Say no to drugs.
That was the slogan.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there needs to be a little bit more education around it, because, and also what does that mean for that particular individual? Because what it would mean to me might mean something different to
That is correct. You know, because then of course, you know, you have a lot of peer pressure and all of that the young people are on. They see all their friends doing it, of course, and so they don't want to be the odd one out and all of that sort of a thing. You know, society today, we have a lot of very young persons smoking.
Yeah. And it's not only the peer pressure alone and seeing friends, but it's the families. You know, mommy is doing it, daddy is doing it, uncles are doing it, people in high positions are doing it and saying that it's okay. So
that is correct.
Why can't I do it as well? They're saying it's fine, why can't I do it? But nobody's really giving the education as to how it will affect the brain at a young age.
Yes.
You know, just that it's okay. Science says it's okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. I suppose a lot of these behaviors that we see, a lot of it I mentioned before, the prevention. So early intervention is very, very important. Early intervention is key. Because if there's not early intervention, then of course, you know, the molehill becomes a mountain.
Correct.
Yes. And that's where the early intervention work would lie with the probation and child protection services by that early. I mean, because any child that comes into conflict with the law, it's only going to be a small percentage that becomes persistent offenders.
Yes.
So if you have that approach with the diversion that I'm sure Mr. Collin would have covered last week about the diversion programs that are now quite active through the Child Justice Committee. He must have mentioned the Child Justice Committee, which I forgot to mention earlier on when I said it was the magistrate court. Last year was the first time that we now, St. Kitts and the Federation has introduced the Child Justice Committee, which is a diversion from young people going through the punitive court system. So it's more of a child-friendly approach to address matters of conflicts with the law, which makes it much more of an easier understanding for the child to understand exactly what's going on, and also to make a negotiable agreement contract of how they're actually going to engage to curb their offending behavior.
Yeah, and that is so important, the early intervention, because parents are responsible for early intervention. Teachers are responsible for early intervention. Because as a parent, if you really know your child, and if you're really carrying out your parental duties, if you're really monitoring, you must not notice certain behaviors. You must notice what your child is doing and so on. You can't tell me that you have a child living with you who is becoming a monster right under your nose and you're not even recognizing it.
I think.
But you see, what I would like to say with that, even though you're saying that teachers, parents should deal with all intervention, our community fail a lot of our kids.
Correct.
Yeah.
The community approach, of
Yes,
course.
because
Just
a lot of
want to
us
say that.
actually watch a child growing up to be a monster. And then we have this tendency of saying, I don't study, he's just stupid, big and stupid, and just like him fired up.
We ignore
Just like-
it.
But instead of we going and trying to encourage him, like, yo, what you doing, man? That's the wrong word, you know what I mean? And try to pull him back. We encourage him and we tell him a lot of things. And so he know, forget and start to disrespect everybody in the community because he realizes, well, nobody here like me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because nobody showing in the community showing him love.
Yeah.
We showing him the hatred and we push him aside.
I think
But look
that's
for
not-
somebody who is just quiet and nice,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah, once ago we had that saying,
not-
Mr. Brown, that it takes a community to
Takes a village
to
raise
a village, a community to raise a child. You know, but nowadays what you're finding though is that sometimes the parents are not on board because sometimes when you try to correct the child,
that's a point.
when you try to correct the child goes home and the child reports it to the parent, and instead the parent try to understand, the parent come and the parents abuse you. As we said, the parents cuss you out.
And I think
So
because of society's structure, I mean, if you take it back 20 or 30 years before, there was always probably a parent at home. Financially, you probably could have managed on one parent going to work where another parent would probably be at home, or grandmother would be at home, or another family would be at home. But because of the breakdown of family structures in society now, and everybody's kind of on this path of, I can do it by myself, I can raise by myself, we're perpetuating seeing the suffering of the outcomes of that.
certainly. We have to go to the phone lines. We are going to the phone lines. There's so much that we are discussing here and so much left to be discussed, and it is such a interesting discussion. The phone numbers to call are 466-2666. That's 466-2666. The 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, that is 767-4765, and the international number is 1-239-645-4500. That is 1-239-645-4500. We welcome your calls. Right, so I know you mentioned it, Ms. Williams, COVID. COVID-19.
Yes.
And everything today, or I'm sure the children, I mean, they're sort of sheltered and
Yes.
far removed,
Yeah.
you know, from the society, a little bit from, you know, mainstream. But at the very same time, COVID-19 is impacting all of us.
Yes.
How are the children at the center really coping with all of this COVID-19 that they're hearing? How are you dealing with it, with them? You know, the education at the center in terms of, because they're children, so they can't be vaccinated
No.
because the vaccine is not for them. But, you know, the non-pharmaceutical measures, and I'm sure they have certain concerns and so on about their parents and their relatives and all of that sort of a thing. Are they going to get COVID? I mean, we're hearing about so many people dying and all of that.
Well,
How are they dealing with it?
the children are number one, first of all. I mean, we do practice all the protocols that needs to be in place, temperature taken at the gate, hand sanitizing. We've installed a lot of hand sanitizing devices across the centre. The only downfall is that the programming and the education has been placed on hold for the residents.
Visitations.
And well, with visitations, what we've done with the visitations is that instead of the parents coming onto the facility, the parents will come to the gate and stop stopping visitations, which we did last year,
Yeah.
and resumed for it to be on WhatsApp video. That was the way how we was able to engage the young people through WhatsApp calls, WhatsApp videos that they can visually see. So what we've been doing is allowing parents to probably come, but just come to the gate. And I know it's not conventional, but it's so important that the child has our residents see their parents, see their families, because that could be the perk that they need to carry them through. That could be a low point if they're not seeing and having that contact initially. But with the programming that we've had, that all has to come to an end. And as Mr. Brown has said, we've been creative in looking at other ways of how we can engage our young people. But I must say to all the young people at New Horizons Centre, we have a lovely bunch of young people, a lovely group of young people that we have at the centre right now with them. So you know who you are, each one of you. You know, we care very deeply for you. And we would always want alternative ways as well. So for the young people to come up, Miss Sam would met with them. We were taking this time to review some of our policies and review some of our procedures, especially around sanctions and rewards. We wanted to take an opportunity to relook at that policy that we had. Do you want to speak a little bit about that, Ms. Sam?
So the sanction and rewards program is a way for the children to take accountability for their actions and to buy into what it is we're trying to do with them. So the sanctions, of course, the facility has rules and regulations. If the child is to break a rule, there will be some form of repercussion for that. So the children were given opportunity to sit with me and come up with what they think is appropriate in terms of their punishment for breaking the rules. We at New Horizon try very hard not to be a punitive system. We encourage growth, and we encourage rewards, we encourage positivity and reinforcement of good behavior.
Right, we have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Roy.
Good afternoon.
And the people here from New Horizon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon to you all. I have a question. I got a lot of information really to so happy that the lady speak out about it. Now, one question is, suppose you have that support. I've known a child, he's a child, and he's between the age of 9 to 10. And I've heard you all speak about the language that they use every now and then. And sometimes when they realize that you talk to them, they limit the amount of bad word they would use. But this young kid, I put this in a couple months ago, that when you're playing among his peers, every 4 words, you have 5 of them is bad word. That is to show you how he used them. And when people talk to the mother about his behavior, the mother, me can't go with him, me can't go with him, you can't go with him. If you can't go with him, well, who you expect to go with him? So, a purpose like that, how do you all get them to come in your writing? That's question number 1. And the last question, what is, how secure is the security over there from children becoming easy prey to predators? Because over the years, I'm talking about like sexual harassment or behavior, sexual abuse. Over the years, there was one of the person in charge over there, and a young girl went in, belly flat, and she come out belly big. And it was done by one of the supervisors on the job. So how safe are the children them from that being from getting sexual abuse by those in authority? I will listen out here for the response, please.
Okay. Would you like to respond?
There was 2 questions.
Yes.
The first one was
How to get the 10-year-old into New Horizons.
how young people come to New Horizons.
Somebody with the bad words.
So
bad word story,
the
yeah.
only thing, if parents are experiencing any difficulties and challenges with their child and they feel that they have done everything that they can and they needed the extra support, The only thing that I can advise you is to contact the Probation and Child Protection Services, 467-1020, and have a discussion with Mr. Connor, who is the director, or Mr. Narin Maynard, who is the deputy that oversees Child Protection Services, or Ms. Tavanna Wharton, who is the deputy that oversees children that comes into conflict with the law. Now, so that's the advice. Seek help. We all need help. Parenting is the most difficult and unrewarding at times job that anybody could have, and especially for parents that are bringing up their child alone. I'm not just going to say mothers, because I know that fathers also probably plays that position as well. So everybody goes through, everybody that's had a child has had some challenges raising a child. So no matter what it might look like on the outside, when you see families walking down the street and they look all happy and everything looks prim and proper, scratch hard, there's something that's there. Not saying with all families, every family goes through a challenge. You're not alone, so don't feel that you have to manage this thing by yourself. It's not bad for you to seek help and seek support, because as I said earlier on, that village and that community that used to be around 20, 30, 40 years, that used to offer the support for the families, it's not really there today. So anybody that needs the help and needs support, please don't feel for 1 minute that you can't reach out and ask for help. Now, I know that in terms of the second question that the gentleman caller that had, that was of the assumption that a staff member inappropriate behaviour. I'm not going to go into details about this due to confidentiality, but there's something called Chinese whisper. That was a false narrative. It was a false narrative that anybody pertaining to the staff team that was involved in any kind of contact with the children at New Horizon. And that's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to leave that conversation there.
Right. Now, of course, you know, the children, the juveniles won't be at the center forever. You are preparing them to reintegrate and to go back into society better than how they came into the center. Could you tell me something about the process really for them reintegrating into society? You know, how do you make an assessment that they should be reintegrated into the society? Is it that they just reach a certain age, then they're adult, and then they just say, well, look, you now have to be released from the center back into the society? Do you prepare them for the world of work, for example? And that transition, how do you prepare them for that? Because that is so important. Because what you don't want is that you don't want recidivism or repeat offenders. Just like the big prison and so on, you may have people coming out and then they have to come back and all of that sort of a thing. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so reintegration begins when the child enters our gate on that very first day. That's when we start to look at what's going to happen when the child leaves. We start to work with families as to what do we need to address in this family. Do we need to address parenting issues? Do we need to address how the children and the family members, the mother, father, whomever, relate to each other? Do we need to address the parent getting social assistance? You know, maybe they need help with finding a better housing situation. Maybe they need help with work. Maybe they need help with whatever the case might be. We look at all of that. We look at the child as an individual in terms of academics. Are you academically inclined? If you are not, what skill can we give you to go back into the world so that you can manage on your own? Ms. Williams would have mentioned that we partner with National Youth Skills, and we have persons come in. We also have school break programs where we try to expose the children to as much as possible. We have done financial management. We have done budgeting, you know, how to manage a home, teaching you basic life skills on if you are to go back and your home is where you left is not appropriate for you and you have to go on your own, can you function? So we look at giving you those skills to make sure that you're able to do that. We look at job attachments, send the children out to be interns in a particular setting, whichever setting that they display interest in. We will give them that opportunity to go out. Thankful for all of the companies that would have agreed to us sending out our children there and creating space for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We would have send them out to intern for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month at a time, just to get that experience so that they know what it's like in the world of work. We would have looked at when the time is coming closer for them to actually go back into their home settings, we engage the family. We take them home. Sit down and see what interaction is like with the family. Has anything improved? Do we still need to work on things? Do we need to fast forward some things, put more pressure on other agencies to get things done? Do we need to we sit down and work with them on resumes, to send out? Do we need to start looking for jobs for them? If they're going back to school, we take them to the school, so they sit with the counselor. They already is aware of what is going to happen. We create this plan in relation with the children and their families, so they know exactly what it is. They know who is responsible. They know the timeline that is going to be done in. We try to get all of this done at least 3 weeks before the child is supposed to be leaving us. So when they leave, it's a smooth as possible transition. We also provide them with what we call a care package, especially if they're going into an underprivileged, quote-unquote, household, where we provide them with everything, all of their basic needs that they will possibly have for at least a period of 6 months, so they do not have to worry about that. So within that time where they're looking for a job or just getting reacquainted with school or just settling in, there's no worry about what it's like at home because everything is done, everything is set. We try our best to engage, for those who need it, a mentor, so that the support and supervision that you have received 24 hours at New Horizon doesn't just disappear. So with that mentor, we the caseworkers will still stay on for a period of 3 months after, checking in. We'll have meetings with the family to make sure that everything is going as it should be going. If there's any concerns, any worries, sometimes parents themselves don't know how to readjust. So we will help them in that process. If they have an issue, call us up, we'll come. It's okay, we'll sit down with you, we'll sit down with your child, we'll talk about whatever the issue is and work it out for you, well, try to work it out for you.
Yes.
But better yet, assist you to work it out for yourself.
Right, so,
Yes.
you support the transition.
Yes.
You offer support, mentorship, even though the person is not there. Some of the residents returning home, of course, you don't want them returning back to a situation
No.
that is abusive,
Correct.
a situation that is violent and so on. So the families definitely you have to engage the
Yep.
family as well, because they are in a lot of families are really in need of rehabilitation.
Yeah.
It's not just the children, it's the families that are in need of rehabilitation. And you don't want to, as there's a biblical saying, you don't want to pour new wine into old
that.
wine skins, because it's going to burst. You understand? And so therefore, you don't want somebody going back into the very same unhealthy environment, because that can then unfold everything, unfold everything or create a conflict, because then that child is bringing certain life skills and so on and what they would have learned, and then on one hand they're coming up against something which is totally different to what they would have learned, and it creates a conflict in the environment and a conflict within that child.
We have had situations like that where I've dealt with a parent who every time she comes to visit her child, she will very clearly state, this is my child is never going to change. And the child herself was making every progress possible, like she identified goals. This is what I want to do with my life, this is what I need to be doing. I cannot do that with my mother. So what do? We find a foster parent. We find somebody, if we can't find a family member who is willing, we'll find foster parents out there who is willing to take on this responsibility and be the guidance that that child needs. Because, like you said, we cannot put a rehabilitated child into a situation that has not changed in any instance, because it undoes all the work.
Back into a repressive situation. The caller before, though, Ms. Williams, I know that this is not happening at the Horizon Center, but at the same time, he brought up a very important issue. Because we have heard, like in foster homes and in certain institutions of care for children and so on, there has been abuse, whether it is physical, whether it is sexual, whether it is emotional abuse. Human beings are human beings. And children coming from an environment already of abuse, whatever form of abuse it is, and coming from an environment that is not safe, they need a safe space. Right? And so therefore that safe space must be provided for them.
Yes.
And so therefore, I am sure that there's a zero tolerance policy at the Horizons in terms of that sort of a behavior from any sort of a staff.
Absolutely.
Or any sort of a thing. So maybe you can speak a little bit to satisfy that caller in terms of the policy that is at the New Horizons Center with respect to that sort of thing.
Whether it's, as you said, abuse is abuse, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's sexual. So, well, it first starts with an application, and then it starts with the vetting process that we will have to go through. So just because an application comes in, the usual process will be that they will get a police report to see if there's any convictions. I also make contact with the police for them to do a more in-depth report. So it's not just the report that we're getting back from St. Kitts, but to see if there was any international connections that they would probably be able to do around the region as well to get the information. In addition, we also conduct, of course, the people are going to put in their referees who they want, but we would also look into go and do some community checks and community backgrounds as well to ask around in the community about the person so we can get a full picture of who we have coming in to work with the children, that the children are safe, and first and foremost as well. So we do all the background tick boxes that we could do, not just on the surface, the standard lies ones that government workers would normally take, but we go that extra mile by trying to look into holistically who knows this person in the background. And then, and I can vouch for all the workers that are here.
Yes.
Because even when it comes down to the training, and initially when we started back 8 years ago, because we all came together the 1st of April 2013 when we started our training, and looking at how we, because it first starts with our self-control as workers, because we've got to, as I mentioned before, model the behaviour that we want to see in the child. So we've got to know how to talk with them, we've got to know how to engage with them, and also when there's areas of conflict, knowing that there's that self-control in the staff member for them to be able to keep their cool and to keep their calm when they're engaging with the child. So on full background checks in terms of making sure that we do have the right persons coming to work with the centre, we do our utmost best to do all the background checks.
Sure, and I'm sure.
In terms of making sure that they're right. And then goes back to the policies and the practices that we do. I can't even think of a time where there has been, I can probably count on my one hand, if I'm going to be honest, over the 8 years that we've been here, I can count on probably on my one hand how many times that we've had to use restraint or physical forcement to modify somebody that was out of behaviour, or in terms of children coming into conflicts with staff and making assault.
Certainly.
That has, and we can pride, I can say that, Mr. Brown and Ms. Sam, we can pride ourselves on that and give the parents reassuring that when your child do come to the centre, we respect the children, there's no physical, none of the questions that we use any
They're
form
safe.
of physical ways of how to control the children.
Okay.
It's always through
Right.
communication.
Thank you there. So we have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And good afternoon to the good lady there from the Horizon Home.
Good afternoon.
No, good afternoon, yes. Now, I am here listening to the program. And some of those children who disobedient and behave bad in the street and got to go to the Horizon Home, I think that when those children come back out, they don't get a learning and they don't get a caring and teaching and know how to learn from wrong from right and do what to do. I believe that children, because some of these parents, when they're going back home too, some of these parents will want some training too, and some caring, because some of these parents just maybe more ignorant and violent than them. You understand? They ain't have nothing good to tell them. As soon as they make a little mistake, they tell them, oh, you're going to make a jail, you're going to make a order, and all those kind of things. You know? So I believe when the children come out at that Horizon Home, if they ain't got a loving and a good parent, a good father to send them back to, you are trying to put them in some better environment, that they could learn a skill, that they could get something positive to do. Because if they go back in the same environment, it's the same people they will end up to be. And it wouldn't be no good for the society. You understand? So, good program, and you know, to see that the people do not tune into this positive program when this program on. But I always keep in tune, because I myself was a little disobedient when I was small. I went on my own when I was 16, and that teach me to care me, to work hard for what I want. And I'm glad what I am today, as me own by myself, when me go own my own property and everything. I come up hard. My mother had 14 of us, and we really come up hard. So we want to see young people get a positive life, a positive trade, something good to do, turn around and do in the Federation. Because, you know, going down the road again with the violence and the ignorance, that cannot pay off for the country. I will continue to listen to the program. Good program.
Very good point that you would have made. I don't think you were looking for an answer, because that has been treated in what we were discussing before. You were just reiterating basically what was said before.
But I don't want to give the audience an impression that every child that's coming to the centre is rude, bad and out of order.
Right.
That's just a stereotype that people associate. There's all different reasons why children will come to us, and not everybody fits into that category.
Right.
Some do, and
some don't.
Mm-hmm. And with regards to the parents, as we said before, it is the work that the Probation and Child Protection Service will do. Also, the counsellor has engaged in therapeutic counselling for the parents themselves as well. Because as we said before, that nobody teaches anybody to be a parent. That parent has probably gone through trauma themselves. They've probably experienced some of the abuse that we've mentioned earlier on, and probably has never ever spoke about it, never ever dealt with it, and that is perpetuating and taking over their lives. So for whatever reason a parent is who they are and what they are and what they're doing is a representation of their own past experience. But what we try and do is offer the support to the parents, whether it's through the Probation and Child Protection Services, or there's been times that parents have engaged in a one-to-one with our counsellor to address their needs first. Because if they can't address their needs, it's very unlikely they're going to be able to support and address the needs that their child has.
Right. Now, Ms. Williams, I know that there is staff development and supervision and support and evaluations that constantly take place at the Horizon Center. So I'm not going to go there, but I want you to tell us how can the community support the New Horizons Juvenile Rehabilitation Center? What kind of support can they offer?
what I'm going to say about that, as the gentleman rightly said who just telephoned in, that he can remember back in his youth where he was rude and out of order, but he's had some life changes, and I'm sure he probably would have had some support to have taken him to that next level, to now he's become a responsible citizen that's owned properties and managing himself. That's the same approach we would like the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis to see our young people come out, and when they reintegrate back into the community, they need support. No man's an island. There's no way that a child could come and spend time with us, learn skills, go back home and attain them without getting any support. Even if we just look at ourselves growing up, those that came from families where you had mum and dad, or you just was dad or mum, and they played a very strong role in us, we needed support. We need support from our parents. We probably got the support from our brothers and sisters. We probably got support from the church. Families, there's some families that don't have that. So what my plea is to the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis is that Miss Sam would have mentioned earlier on about mentoring. When the child comes out and the child goes back home, if home is the right place for that child to return, there's going to always be an opportunity for that child to have a support system that's round, because there's going to be times where the child's going to fall out with mum or fall out with dad, don't see eye to eye. That's just teenage growing up. That's just the realities of life. So what we're asking for is for mentors to come forward to be able to offer the support and guidance to the child, that especially once they've reintegrated back home, there's that somebody that they could go to and talk to and get the support and advice from. Because a lot of times when a child hears something that hasn't come from their mom, hasn't come from their dad, or hasn't come from their family, and somebody else has said it, they're saying the same thing, but it's somebody else that has said it, sometimes they would gravitate to listen to that person. So this is an opportunity for us to really request your support, if one way or the other that you could be able to offer any support to any of our children. And it could just be a mentoring role, meaning you could meet up with that person, but once COVID, or even just over the phone, that you could meet up with the person and have conversations, give them some encouragement, give them some guidance, or if there has been a breakdown and that young person needs somebody that they can talk to, they would need that, because we all need that. As adults in our lives, we always need that confident person that we can go and confide in, that would first of all listen. The most important thing that in this world is to be listened to. Somebody wants somebody to give them their undivided attention and to listen to what they've got to say. I mean, that's the basic need for society.
Okay.
And if we have anybody within our federation that has an open heart that can offer that to any of the children that comes from the New Horizon, don't be fooled by the rude and disgusting, because not all of them are rude and disgusting. That's just the narrative that I want to put out there.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Williams. We're basically out of time. I will give you 1 minute, Mr. Brown, our house parent at the New Horizons, and Ms. Sam, the case manager, to make a wrap-up statement.
Well, I will start by saying, that's the support from Ms. Williams was saying. The community is that the challenge is when the child leaves New Horizon and go to the community, instead of stereotyping, helping, because everybody needs a second chance in life. And that's what the child needs when he go out, a second chance. So instead of just ridiculing, giving it a bad name by going and tell somebody something negative about him, just give him a positive vibes every day you see him, something positive, and he will just move on.
Right. First, I just want to thank everybody thus far who would have supported us with what we're trying to do, and who would have bought into our ultimate goal of giving them children a second chance. Everyone who has given us a spot in their business for internships and so forth, everyone who has volunteered to come out and spend some time with the children and teach them a skill, we completely, wholeheartedly appreciate it. And we look forward to more support. We look forward to more people buying into what we're trying to do and more people giving back to the children that are at New Horizon. Thank you.
And I would just like to end by thanking all the staff that works at New Horizon now. Everybody's doing an amazing job. We probably don't tell you enough, but I appreciate you, appreciate your work, I appreciate your dedication that you have. When we go through challenging times, everybody pulls together. And also I'd like to thank the staff that has worked with us over the past years as well. We haven't forgotten you. You are the groundbreaking, you're the trailbreakers that have supported us in the beginning when we started and has laid the foundation that we are now working on.
Okay.
So I thank you. I also would like to thank as well our board. We have a Probation and Child Protection Board. Thank you for the support, especially the training and also program committee that has supported us with developing our programs as well, and the ministry as well, Ms. Lewis, Janelle Lewis Tafari, our Permanent Secretary. Thank you for the support that you have offered us as well.
Okay, and my thank you to all of you, to the three of you, Mr. Colbert Brown, our New Horizons house parent, Ms. Shani Sam, New Horizons case worker, and Ms. Adele Williams, New Horizons director. Thank you to all three of you for coming and sharing about the wonderful work that you're doing at the New Horizons Juvenile Rehabilitation Center.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our callers to today's program and all of our listeners to today's program. Next week we will be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams. Take good care.